There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Friday Reads. It's 36 degrees out there at noon on my Friday here in Tokyo, and there's no chance I'm going to go out in that. So here I am, inside where I have the aircon set to air conditioner. Aircon. Does anybody say aircon except in Japanese English? I never did before I came here. The air conditioner is set to a balmy 20 degrees, 24 hours a day. I've got my husband Kenji well trained because 20 degrees Celsius aircon all night long is beautiful, but I wake up in the middle of the night cold and put a blankie on me. Kenji sleeps with no blanket. He's so used to it. It's lovely. Anyway, so I have had a very interesting reading week. I have lots to tell you, including this delightful announcement. The Empress of Bailing is back with a vengeance. I have bailed on 4 books this week. Go me! So let's start with that. You'll remember I think it was at the end of last week's Friday Reads that I said I wanted to do a little bit of spontaneous reading. And the more spontaneous I am with my reading, the more I bail, which is wonderful. It's the best way to read. So, I have lots to tell you. The book that I hinted at with the chicken with its head cut off on the cover, that my friend Lindy was freaked out by the cover, I did try that and didn't get very far. The Union of Smokers by Patty Scott, a new release. It was a comic novel set in Saskatchewan about maybe he was a teenager and then flashbacks to when he was 12, something like that, who had shit parents and both dead or one missing and one dead, and was living with rather stable grandparents on the farm just outside of the rinky-dink little town. I really quite liked the writing, but it was completely narrated first person by this kid, and after about 20 pages I couldn't stand that and bailed. So other people, if you don't mind child narrators that are cute and irreverent and there's no break from that, like, I don't mind it when child narrators are kind of fixated on adults. That I can deal with, but this was just kind of a child-centered world, and no. Check out The Union of Smokers by Patty Scott. Didn't work for me, might work for you. It's on Scrib, the ebook. Also, I was surprised that I bailed on a new release out of Ireland, The Wild Laughter by Caolan Hughes. That is a female writer, and I thought the writing was excellent. It is about a farming family, and it's set during the 90s? They have a special word for that era in Ireland. Anyway, I've lost whatever that phrase was, but during the I actually don't know. Around 2008, just after the crash or just before, I don't know. I didn't get far enough into the story, and I didn't actually give a rat's ass about anything. The writing was really good. It was about a farming family, 2 brothers. One brother was the younger brother. I think he's the younger brother, was the narrator. And the father made a bad choice investment-wise to try to get himself out of his poverty-stricken farming realities. And that went south, and then he got a terminal illness. So a lot of that sounds like a Sean story, but what happened was I realized that the narrator, the one son, was a misogynist prick. And so I want to congratulate the author, a female writer, for creating what I think I got a third of the way in, maybe 40% of the way in, to spin such an incredibly misogynist story. So, congratulations, but I hated everybody. So, the scene that finished me off, although I did read another maybe 10 or 15 pages after that, was where the 2 brothers have dates, and they go back to the one brother's house. He lives in the bigger city, and so the narrator brother basically starts to date rape his date, who he was not attracted to at all, and just spoke about in the most hateful way, telling us the story, and then got carried away, but let's call it what it is. It was date rape, his date, the woman, cried out for help, and so the woman that was with the other brother came, intercepted, got the other woman home in a cab, and came back into the bedroom with the date rape brother, not the one she was having sex with, but the date rape brother, and then couldn't stop looking at his beautiful body. And they had sex in the shower the next morning and became an item. So I just thought, you know what? I fucking hate this kind of story. And I'm one of those readers that... I said in my review, I'm one of those uncool readers that if I hate all of the characters, I will bail. But I think on further reflection, it's not just that I hated the characters. Like the mother of the dying man was portrayed as just being... on-feeling and uninteresting. None of the people, like... And I'm supposed to care that the man's dying? Like, I'm supposed to feel bad for the son whose father's dying when he's a date rapist? Like, I just... Fuck off with that shit! I don't have any room in my reading life for those kinds of stories, so... Ugh! But if you do, please check it out, because the writing is really good. So that happened. I also didn't get very far with Rachel Cusk's outline. Again, the writing was really good, and it was a little bit intriguing that this novel didn't reveal anything about the first-person narrator other than that she was interested in everybody around her. So a lot of mini-stories where she was just kind of recording, revealing very little about herself. But the conversations she was having with the people that she was meeting were so banal, and too many of them, like I encountered in the first 20 pages, 3 philosophy of life maxims that were just cringeworthy. Like they were on the level of life is a box of chocolates, you never know what you're gonna get, and it's like, yeah, I know I don't want to get this. And I sadly bailed on a book for women in translation that I just kind of discovered from Morocco. So I'm just going to do my best. The author's name, she's French-Moroccan, Meido Hamisotane. That is probably butchered, and that's the best I can do. And her novella is called La Blanche. The English translation is also La Blanche, and I didn't like it. It was only 90 pages, and I couldn't finish it. The writing wasn't bad. Oh, translated from the French by Suzy Soulan Hughes. The translation seemed fine, but the story was just kind of wispy, and an adult French-Moroccan woman returning to Morocco years after she and the family had left after her grandfather was murdered. And then there were scenes when she was, I think, 12 years old, just after the murder, but nothing was explained about who murdered, and I don't care about murder mysteries, so I was already nervous. This isn't going to be a murder mystery, is it? You know, I can't stand murder mysteries. But the reviews I saw said that it was never explained, and then we kept flipping back between the present and the past in a way that didn't make sense for me. Like there was one scene 25-30 pages in where she was in Paris on her way to the airport to go back to Morocco, and then she asked the taxi driver to turn around. It's like, what? Okay. Why did we need, like, what? Just really strange, uninteresting things explained in a very overwrought way. Some of the writing was nice, but I just didn't care, so bailed on that. So those are my bails. The one that just makes me the angry Cowlin Hughes, the wild laughter. Jesus! I have finished 3. I finished Osamu Dazai's The Setting Sun. This is like about a 1948 novel from Japan, translated by Donald Keene. This was a buddy read by Joe Smith. Started out really strong and interesting. I think that my preliminary comments were positive, but it just devolved into dark, surreal, fucked up nonsense, and I just absolutely didn't care. So it's about a young Japanese woman, Kazuko, living with her widowed mother, and then her brother, who they thought had died in the war, World War II, came home from the war, and he was suicidal, an alcoholic, and a drug addict, and really nasty person, and then the mother dies a long death, and then that was all fine. I was holding on to the story and invested in the story through all of that. But then she gets involved in the stupidest love affair ever recorded in literature that didn't make any sense, and this yearning for this married man who was a nasty person and she had almost no interactions with, but she suddenly, out of the blue, started pining, well, also pining for Rosa Luxemburg's Marxist philosophy, and it just was like all over the map and stupid. What a stupid book. The daughter was an amazing writer. Based on this novel, she must have inherited that from her mother. This was another long, one-story-a-week buddy read. This was the buddy read of Various Miracles, a short story collection by Carol Shields, was with Britta Bowler, and we have finished. I haven't checked in with Britta on the last story. So I gave this 3 stars. This was a reread for me. This was my favorite book by Carol Shields when I was a Carol Shields groupie in the 1990s. Carol Shields was an American-British writer based in Winnipeg who was very, very popular in the 1990s, in the 80s and 90s until her sad death, very young, from cancer, I think in the 90s. And I loved her. I went to many of her readings. I have signed copies of most of her books. And anything I've tried more recently by Carol Shields, I either have hated or bailed on or have had mixed reactions to. So this was a mixed reaction. There were so many stories that I hated that I couldn't give it more than 3 stars, but there was about 3 or 4 stories out of 15 that I loved and were 5-star stories. But so much of them, I don't know what she was doing or what she was trying to prove. And to be fair, I hope Britta will talk about it on her channel. She liked a lot of the stories that I hated. So there are stories here that just didn't appeal to me, that didn't seem to be fiction. They seemed to be kind of whimsical essays or something. I don't know what they were, but they didn't strike me as being short stories. But there were, like I say, a small handful that I loved. Mostly a miss, with a few gems. And I've already posted my review of the short novella from Equatorial Guinea by a queer feminist novelist, La Bastarda, by Trifonia, Melibea Obono, translated from the Spanish by Lawrence Schimel. I put my review up last night. I just was giddy with how taken I was by this short novel, that it was in so many ways not a Sean book, but I loved it. I think I'll still keep it as a 4-star read, but there were things that I deeply loved, and you can check my review out for that. So that was a late addition, a spontaneous addition to my Women in Translation TBR, thanks to Michael Kitto, who talked about it on Twitter, and I saw that I had it on script, and I read it in a couple days on my exercise bike, and that was great. So those are what I finished. I have started some 2, surprise, surprise. I have started this Welsh novel, translated from the Welsh, The Jeweler by Carol Lewis, translated by Gwen Davis. This is the second novel I've read by her, and I think it's the only other of her novels to be translated into English. The one that I have read before, I'll put a link in the show notes, is Martha, Jack, and Shanko. This one I'm hoping might even be better. Martha, Jack, and Shanko, I really enjoyed it. It had some obvious flaws. It was a 4-star read. This is shaping up to be even better. It's very early days, but I love the writing, and it's about a very lovely young woman who makes a living kind of flea market. She's a professional marketeer, like she's got her own little booth at all the not only flea markets but the more professional markets. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but that's her life, and she has a pet monkey. And part of what she does is, and I haven't yet understood how this works, who gives her permission, because she's not committing crimes, but somehow she is given access to homes of recently deceased people. I think maybe the lawyers, the executors hire her. She's on a list of those kind of marketers that will come in and scoop up whatever might be resaleable, but she doesn't seem to pay for it. I don't quite understand how it works, but I'm intrigued as all get out, and her specialty is jewels. So I liking how it's starting out. And I have started an anthology, a very unique, obscure anthology of short stories by women in translation from India that I just stumbled upon on Scribd, and I'm almost half through. It is Spark of Light, short stories by women writers of Odisha, and I had never heard of Odisha. Odisha is a state in India, and I had absolutely never heard of it. Edited by Valerie Hinitiak and Supriya Kar. and written in the Odia language and translated. Each story is translated by its own translator, so I'm not going to take the time to list them all, but there looks like there's about 15 or 20 stories, and that many translators possibly. The translations are great. The stories are really repetitive, and I'm not going to say much because I think I'm going to do a full review where I'm going to try to grapple with my reaction to this book, because there was a certain point where the stories were so similar that I almost bailed. And there isn't a lot of literary innovativeness, structure. There's nothing structurally interesting about most of the stories. And the stories of pain, of female victimization and triumph over misogyny, but the stories do get quite repetitive. And I decided, no, I'm going to stick with it, and I'm really glad, because the very next story, this is not a universal philosophy denouncing bailing, but when it was an anthology, I thought, no, I'm going to miss something good. And in fact, the very next story was great. And I'm also sitting with this feeling that made me think of bailing, which was the stories were all the same about female pain and victimization. And I thought, okay, I need to kind of think more about that as I keep reading. And I am, and I will try to do a full review about that. But yeah, really obscure. It's only got 11 community reviews. It was published quite a few years ago. And so I've been reading about the state of Odisha and the language, and Googling things that are referred to in this story that are part of the culture and the history, and it's been really interesting. Maybe it was published in 2016, but that may have been a reprint date. Goodreads isn't very good about that. I added one more that was not related to any of my ongoing readathons, just one that I wanted to read for myself, and that is The Liar's Dictionary by Ellie Williams. Published about 2 months ago. My copy arrived in the mail about a couple of weeks ago, and I pulled it off the pile before I even put it into a haul video, and I'm a couple chapters in, and it's really good. Ellie Williams is the author of A Trib, which is a genius debut collection of short stories. She is a queer writer from the UK somewhere. She's a lecturer at the University of London, so I guess she's a London-based writer, and very whimsical. This is about a hapless female intern at a dictionary publishing company. It's been in the same family since the 1850s or something, and they've never completed their multi-volume dictionary, and it's very wordy and playful, etymologically, linguistically playful. I'm really enjoying it so far. So a mixed bag, but yeah, even the things that sparked rants were fun and interesting. I will be starting 2 buddy reads in the coming week. Now that Britta and I finished the Carol Shields collection, we are immediately going to start. So we're going to start it in Women in Translation Month, but at a story a week, we're not going to finish it in August. This anthology, The Future of Silence, Fiction by Korean Women, and translated and edited by Bruce and Ju-Chan Fulton, who are a husband and wife translation team based out of UBC in Vancouver. And I read a collection by a male Korean writer whose name, so I'll put a link to my review, and they have done the translating and editing for this collection by Korean women. Looks like there's about a dozen or 15 stories, and I'm looking forward to buddy reading this with Britta, 1 story a week. And similarly, my buddy read of the shitty Japanese novel with Joe Smith is finished, so we're going to start another one that hopefully won't be shitty. 1 chapter a week, and that is The Offing by Benjamin Myers, which Ollie raved about on our recent Zoom chat, and that sparked the idea that Joe and I might buddy read it, so we're going to get that started. It's supposed to be excellent. And I think that's all I've got. Wait. I'm just about finished editing the video when I realized, there was a couple others that I was planning to start next week. The tail end of my Women in Translation TBR, including one that didn't make it onto the TBR that I think I'm going to add this late in the game. So, very quickly, I'm planning to start this one, which was on my TBR, The Adventures of China Iron by Gabriela Cabezón Camela, translated from the Spanish by Fiona Mackintosh and Iona Macintyre. This is one of those wonderful charcoal books. It's a short one. I'm not going to be able to finish it in August, and why would I worry about that? But I'm going to start it next week. And similar, I've decided I'm not going to put this off any longer. I'm going to try I Called Him Necktie by Milena Michko Flazar, translated from the German by Sheila Dickey. So I can use this as part of my Read More German Books 2020 challenge, and it is a Japanese novella, and it's by a woman in translation. This was a book that Britta championed on her channel. I couldn't get access to, so she sent it to me as a prezi. And this tiny little collection of short stories in this little book, Toflis, or The Marriage of Zoze, by Zemaiti. I will double check the pronunciation later. Translated from the Lithuanian by Violeta Kellertis. Zemaiti was born in 1845, died in 1921. That's the pen name of Julija. Oh, I'm not even going to try to pronounce. It's a hyphenated surname with both sides of the hyphen are long and unpronounceable. I will give you more information later, but she wrote out of Lithuania in the late 19th and early 20th century. So I'm going to start this sucker next week too. Really curious about this one. Okay, you can go back to whatever it was you were doing. Oh, I guess you were watching the end of my video, so let's wrap up here. But that's enough. It's been a really interesting reading week. I hope it has been for you, and thanks for watching.